Whenever a big game hits, it's always now what when it comes to that genre. What game was going to be the Halo killer? What game was going to be the next Final Fantasy? What game was going to be the next Fortnite? There is always that question, and with the mega success of Baldur's Gate 3 in 2023, it's natural that the question stretches to what game is going to fill the considerable void left in the CRPG genre. However, the success of Larian's Behemoths has inspired many other developers to give their own take on the revival of the CRPG. There are CRPGs coming in all shapes and sizes, from the typical fantasy trappings to the steampunk-inspired ones and a handful of sci-fi-based CRPGs as well. While they likely all won't hit that Baldur's Gate 3 high, there is plenty of hope with these games. We are going to check out a bunch of CRPGs that are going to do their best to fill the void left by Baldur's Gate 3. The criteria will be games that have yet to see a full release, so much like Baldur's Gate 3, we will be including early access titles that seem to have a good chance of coming out sooner than later.
New Arcline doesn't have a release date yet, but it's been in early access since November of 2024, so we're likely inching closer and closer to an actual release date. Taking after the strategy Baldur's Gate 3 employed isn't a bad move, and this game has all the potential in the world. Speaking of that world, it's a weird and quirky one that immediately conjures up a Bioshock-type feel to it, as well as one that's a clear spiritual successor to the CRPGs of the late 90s and early 2000s. We've got a very unique steampunk type of world here, which opens up some interesting combat options as well as story possibilities. You'll be using both magic and technology to do battle, offering a unique mix that you don't see at most games, let alone CRPGs. You'll have an incredible amount of freedom here with how the story goes, as just the early access content shows this off in multiple ways, allowing you to deal with situations as you see fit, and the answers are rarely black and white. We shouldn't be waiting too much longer for this one to drop, so fingers crossed.
You know what I don't see much of? Anime CRPGs. That's clearly what the vibe is with Guild Saga Vanished Worlds, and that's a good thing. It's currently in early access, but there is no release date yet, so it's possible that this will be cooking a while longer. However, what is there already are the bones of something special. It's unique visually, with a gorgeous 2D and 3D style, and has some outstanding combat that uses elements and strategic positioning that resembles much of what Baldur's Gate 3 does. The charm of the game is not just in the visuals though, as there is also a ton of dialogue, choices, and consequences, character building, lore to discover, and everything else that makes up a great CRPG. This is a different flavor than most, but I could see it making a big splash when it finally exits early access.
Greedfall was trying to be a Witcher 3 light when it released in 2019. Greedfall 2 seems to be aiming to emulate a whole other game, specifically Dragon Age Origins, which was originally inspired by Baldur's Gate 2. Round and round we go. And this one is already in early access, so you can see what plans it's got cooking. The first game was strictly action RPG flavored, but here we have real-time with pause combat that strongly resembles that of Dragon Age Origins. The first game was a respectable effort to do the BioWare thing, and while it wasn't a huge hit, it made the developer Spiders enough money to swing bigger with this sequel. A lot of the groundwork that the first game laid is present here, and in terms of what the game feels like so far, I'd say it's much more Witcher 2 than Witcher 3, which I think is a good thing, because not every game should be open world. It seems the writing, choice, and consequences even more towards the forefront with this game, so expect a lot of variation with how the main quest and side quest can resolve based on how you decide to go about them.
Avernum 4 is getting a remake in the form of Avernum 4 Greed and Glory. It's a random remake for sure, but one that should be quite the fun time for fans of old school CRPG greatness. It's a bit more unique than most CRPGs, with a heavy focus on humor and a unique underground world that feels much different than your typical fantasy CRPG. There are tons of factions to work for or against, and you're able to shape the story in an astounding number of ways as it adapts to what you do throughout the game. It is modest looking to say the least, so the term remake appears to be used loosely here, but the game will make up for it with unmatched depth, combat, and gameplay possibilities, and overall, just something a bit different than you're used to in the CRPG world. This is definitely for the more hardcore CRPG lovers out there, but there's a chance it could catch on bigger than that.
Warhammer 40k Dark Heresy comes from Owlcat Studios as they seek to capitalize on their hit Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader. This game looks to have a way bigger budget and will give us something a bit more cinematic than the more modest offerings visually the previous game had. The writing should still be the star of the show, however, as the previous game put the massively popular series at the forefront of the video game world for the first time on such a grand scale. It was immersive, packed with lore, had great companions, villains, and overall was just a perfect way to dive fully into the vast world of Warhammer. This sequel should be no different. So, if you're looking for that same depth of writing and choice and consequence system, but don't mind going a little bit grimdark in a sci-fi universe to get it, we may just have the next great CRPG to when Owlcat drops this sometime in the near future.
The Way of Wrath is doing something very different from most CRPGs. You play as a Bronze-aged tribal chieftain, leading their tribe through the elements, other tribes, and all manner of challenges as you travel throughout the world. Your decisions as the chief will decide who lives or dies, what resources to forge for, what risks are worth taking, and tons of other scenarios that will pop up throughout your playthrough. This is such an interesting idea for a CRPG, and though some games have tried similar ideas, nothing has been quite the same as what The Way of Wrath is attempting to do. The ambition is large here, but from previews, it looks like the game has a great shot to pull it off, and possibly become the most talked about CRPG since Baldur's Gate 3.
Stellar Tactics is the Star Citizen of CRPGs. It's got endless potential, but it's been in early access for nearly 10 years. So will that potential ever be fully realized? I think it can, because just in early access, there are hours and hours of great gameplay and overall content to dig through here. It's equal parts spaceship combat, management, CRPG, and boots on the ground gameplay. The mix works perfectly. While there is a story to follow, the real strength of the game is the endless amount of planets to explore. There is so much content here already that it's hard to fathom what a full release would even look like. But do you know what other game was in early access for years before an earth-shaking release? Baldur's Gate 3. Now, obviously the budget here isn't what Larian was dealing with, but still, it's clear there is a lot of talent at the controls here, and the only thing holding this game back from hitting it big is losing the early access tag. Give us what's been cooking through 10 years, and I'm sure it will make a galaxy-sized impact.
Solasta 2 has a demo out. I played it and can say this may be the most beautiful CRPG ever made. Does that mean it will be better than Baldur's Gate 3? No, not by a long shot. But what it's doing is impressive. It jumps off the screen with its graphics, but underneath that is a deep combat system that more than a little bit resembles Baldur's Gate 3. That's no surprise, as the game runs on many of the same rules. But here it feels a little bit more complex due to how the turns and action points are treated. The story remains to be seen how it will play out, but it seems like it will be much more plot-focused than the first one. And, since the first game had great gameplay, if you add in a competent story and some spectacular graphics on top of it, we should be cooking with gas whenever this one comes out.
Sector Unknown is already out in its almost finished state, but like most early access titles, it doesn't get that mainstream rub. This comes from a solo developer and is as ambitious as any CRPG coming out in the near future. You will explore space, build a base, a team, and investigate the shady dealings of a megacorporation through your 30-plus hours of playtime here. The game is packed with choices, interesting stories, and some great exploration as well. Each planet has its own stories to tell, and he'll be busy for quite a while when this eventually comes out. It's a very ambitious idea for sure, but it seems like the ideas are solid and both the art style and combat feel up to snuff to be considered among the CRPG greats.
If you're wondering why a Pathfinder game isn't being produced by Owlcat Studios, it's because their last game in the series, Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous, was enough of a hit to fund their second attempt at tackling a licensed game, with their take on The Expanse coming next year. So Ocean picks up the already successful Pathfinder IP and is currently in a Kickstarter to get it off the ground. While we don't have a ton of information about it, if it's anything like the previous 2 Pathfinder games, we should be in for a treat, as it's about as close to Baldur's Gate 3 as you can get. The combat will likely be governed by a similar set of roles, and all the RPG goodness you can handle will be present, like tons of lore, endless dialogue options and decision making, and likely a bunch of endings that vary depending on your choices throughout the game.